All right, well, let's roll. Thank you everybody for joining us today. I'm Jay Young with RPA, and we wanted to set up this webinar to provide some insight and hopefully some answers on the cost segregation process and see if it may be a benefit to you now or at some point in the future. With us today is Dylan Scandalios. He's with Seneca Cost Segregation Services. I have used Dylan personally and have referred to him to many owners in the past. So we wanted to allow Dylan to spread some of the good news about cost segregation. Um, Dylan, I think that when most of us think about rental properties, we think about our return based on our cash flow statement at the end of the year. But there's also some added goodies that we look to that help us with that return. The first one is appreciation, and every year that your property appreciates above inflation, that certainly is an added benefit. If you have a mortgage, then it's the power of leverage, so that helps out as well. The second one is principal recapture. As you pay your mortgage down, the more every year you pay, the more you're paying to principal, and sometimes that doesn't appear on a cash flow statement. And then thirdly, you have depreciation, and the IRS allows us to depreciate a rental property over 27 and a half years. In the case of $1 million purchase, typically you get to depreciate about 70% of that. So a $700,000 improvement allowance over 27 and a half years is about $25,000 a year, and you get to depreciate that. So that's an extra little kind of boost towards your bottom line. The fourth one is this bonus depreciation or accelerated depreciation, which you're going to talk to us about today. So before we turn it over to you, I think we're going to go maybe 15, 20 minutes with you. If anybody in the audience has a question that they want to have answered, just go ahead and type it into chat, and we'll try to get all those answered. And if you don't get your question answered, certainly go ahead and feel free to reach out to Dylan directly. He's a great guy, and we'll answer very, very responsive, and we'll answer your questions. So yeah, Dylan, take it away. Thank you.
Perfect. And I just sent a request for sharing my screen. And in the meantime, I can just kind of introduce myself. So yeah, I'm the owner of Seneca Cost Segregation. My co-founder and I started this company largely because he had been using cost segregation himself since about 2018, and he has not paid federal income taxes since 2018. And that's been amazing for him. He owns a roofing company as well, and he's been able to basically take some cash flow that he's generating from the roofing company and be able to grow his real estate portfolio while reinvesting as much cash as possible. So that's been really awesome. My personal background, I lived in San Francisco for about 7 years. I was both selling software and made it up to actually selling for a public company. And then also I built products as a product manager. So I really have been on the revenue side as well as on the building side. And I'm very comfortable working with engineering teams as well as working with business folks who are trying to get the results that they want as fast as possible with as minimal downside. And so cost segregation to me really fit both of those things really well. I get to work with engineers. I get to work with folks like Jay and hopefully folks like everybody on this call to help them achieve their dreams, to help them achieve financial independence, to achieve, passive income and appreciation over time. And so I thought it'd be helpful to kind of start with what is cost segregation? Some people have heard of it, some people haven't. Some people have maybe jumped in a little bit more than others. So I'm going to share my screen and just walk through a few slides. And I just want to confirm, Jay, you can see everything on the screen, right?
We got it. Yeah, we got
Okay,
it.
perfect. I have this cheesy slogan at Seneca called invest, segregate, engineer wealth. I think the folks that are really good at generating wealth, they take an active role in their wealth generation. They're not necessarily just saying, hey, put it on the back burner. I'm going to do whatever happens. They're really saying, hey, how can I use taxes to my advantage? How can I work with partners who are going to help me on my goals as well? And so we're right along with our partners. So what is cost segregation and what is a cost segregation study? So here's a house on the left and here's the inside of it. And typically, everything in this house would depreciate a little sliver over 27 and a half years. And so, what that might look like, and I'll just kind of go forward a little bit, is it would look like this. On $1 million property with a little bit of land taken out, you might take a $10,000 deduction in the first year and then maybe $20,000 after that. And that will help you reduce your taxable income. You will pay less taxes. The government says, hey, good job investing in real estate. We want to keep the economy going. That's great. Here's this deduction. But ultimately, if we go back to this property, everything here is being depreciated over 27 and a half years. But that doesn't make sense. Can anybody, or maybe Jay, in this picture, tell me what might not last 28 years over time?
The hardwood floors.
Hardwood floors, that's a great example.
Hmm.
Also, a lot of this like hard landscaping, a lot of the hardscaping, a lot of the asphalt. And if anybody's dealt with a driveway, they know that it cracks and you have to repair that. So a cost segregation study basically doesn't treat everything in the property as the same. It says, okay, wait, there's some asphalt here. There's a dishwasher here. There's decorative lights. There's a stove. There's decorative wood here on the right, and it basically separates out everything that makes up the house and allows you to then treat those components as they should and depreciate them in a much faster way. And so what happens is your depreciation, instead of taking a small deduction over time, you're able to front load. You're able to accelerate that depreciation. And so, and this next chart looks crazy because it kind of is. Your deduction, instead of just being a small amount over time, ends up being really front loaded. So you're able to maybe take a almost $200,000 deduction versus a 10K deduction in the first year. And for someone who's trying to reinvest their money into real estate, being able to take down their taxable income by almost 200K versus 10K, that is a huge difference. And that's the difference between, someone paying $60,000 and maybe receiving $60,000. So I'll pause there. Jay, if you have any questions, I'm going to just talk about a quick case study as well.
Looks good. Case study. Yeah.
Awesome. So basically, we've now gone into this house. This is actually led by engineers from our team, and they find everything in this property, and they say, okay, we're gonna then generate a report for you, and it says, here's what we found. Here's the property that fell into 5 year. Here's the stuff that fell into 15 year. Here's the stuff that's gonna stay as long term, and then you can take this report to the IRS and say, hey, I don't want to treat everything as long term property. I want to take it faster. And you end up like John, which is a real customer. This happened. This was an email we received about 3 weeks ago. And I said, hey, John, how did it go? What was it like? Talk to me about that conversation with your CPA. And he said, turned out really good. We will get over $60,000 in a refund and another 75K in deductions for future tax credit for 2025. I hit the AMT in 24, so my refund was a little bit limited. Makes sense. I'm pretty stoked. Thank you, Dylan. And so this happens every day where we're able to front load that depreciation, bring people savings now, and allow them to reinvest it.
So Dylan, in this case study, is this another instance where there was like say $700,000 and they took a lion's share? That is it almost 200 up front and then it's reduced to much less over the next 27 and a half years?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So with this person, they're able to take about a 200K deduction in that first year for them at their, okay, let's just back up. So taxable income means the income that you will be taxed on. So if you have $200,000 worth of taxable income and you get taxed at 37%, then that means you're going to pay $74,000. And so if we were to reduce your taxable income to 100,000, Well, shoot, then you're going to pay half of $74,000. So for a lot of people, the game is, how do I reduce my taxable income? And because depreciation reduces your taxable income dollar for dollar, it's a really effective tool to reduce taxable income. So for John, he's saying, hey, we were going to pay $60,000 in taxes. Instead, I'm getting a 60K refund because I actually overpaid. And then I'm actually going to get some money that's going to roll over into my tax return for 2025.
Great.
And so that's really the power of cost segregation. There's a few other things that I can talk about, but I'd love to, kind of open it up to maybe Jay if you have any questions. Uh, yeah,
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I know I can speak for many of us, but I think the obvious ones are, well, then, what happens when I sell the property? So you're basically going to be responsible for, having a lower basis, correct? So one of the avenues that the workarounds for that is to do a 1031 exchange, and then you just keep on, you know, pushing out that, that taxable recapture to some point into the future. Okay. And then I guess the second question is, what happens, um, you know, at what point can I take this accelerated depreciation, right? Does it have to be on year one? Do I have to do it before I buy the property, or can I do it on year five and do a look back or reconfigure it, right?
yeah, great question. So I think let's address some of the kind of top questions.
Okay.
So first thing, so what is depreciation? There's a bunch of different ways to think about depreciation. In one way, it's a tax deduction. In another way, it's essentially a 0% loan that the IRS is giving you that you do have to pay back in the future. But for now, they're going to charge you 0% interest, which is really cool because as we know, dollars today are worth more than dollars maybe 10 years down the road where I'm going to sell. So, what Jay's saying with what happens in the future. So, let's say, and this is just for round numbers, folks might have more expensive, more less expensive properties, but $1 million property, and let's say 100K of that is land. So, you have a 900K cost basis. You keep that for 5 years, and then, oh, 1 second. You keep that for 5 years and then sell it 5 years later. What happens is that depreciation that you've taken reduces your cost basis. And this can get a little confusing. But let's say you've taken 200K of depreciation. That means you have 700K in cost basis left. So if you were to sell that property in year five, you would have to pay back that depreciation. But let's say the property is worth 1.1, you sell it for 1.1. So you'd pay 200K back in depreciation and then 100K back of capital gains. And so that depreciation is you wouldn't need to pay it then if you do a 1031 exchange. So a lot of people will do a 1031 exchange, which is basically when instead of selling, you sell the property, but you actually trade up into a different property. And instead of paying that tax right then, you defer it, you push it down the road. So a lot of people will do 1031, 1031, 1031, keep trading up and either never pay the tax and then they die and their heirs get a step up in basis at the new value, or they'll pay it at some point, but just not right now.
And the second part of that is, at what point can you do you want to take advantage of this? Is it right before you buy it, or is it down the road?
Yeah,
What's it look like?
Yeah, good question. So we love working with folks that are saying, "Hey, I'm in the process of closing on a property. I want to know what's going to be the savings that I can expect from this property." And so they send us the property details and we basically do an estimate where our engineers are looking at Google Earth, they're looking at, Zillow pictures that might be available, they're looking at county records, and they then say, "Okay, this is what we found. This is what we estimate your depreciation with a study to be." And then that usually doesn't affect the person's, I'm going to either invest in this or not, because typically tax deductions are kind of a bonus and they aren't the reason necessarily to buy a property. But doing it early gives someone a really good sense of, okay, this is the tax deduction I'm going to be working with. And then when do you actually get the study done? typically really close to when you closed on the property, because our engineers will need to actually look at everything inside and outside the property. So that's typically a lot easier to do when there aren't tenants inside of it. The caveat that I will say is when you're going to buy the property, but then you have to do a kitchen remodel and maybe you have to fix some things in the bathroom. You typically want to get those done before you have the study done, because we want to capture everything possible. And then the last question, which is, well, shoot, Dylan, I wish I knew about this a lot sooner. I could have been saving some money. I bought this property in 2022. Can I do a cost segregation study on that? The answer is yes. So what happens is we would conduct the study now, and then what would happen is that depreciation basically gets pulled forward into your current tax return. So the money that is in excess of the depreciation that you've already taken would still hit in 2024 if you haven't, if you filed your extension, or in 2025 if you haven't filed yet.
Right. And is there such thing as bonus depreciation on top of the normal amount? So is that still allowed, and what's that look like?
Yeah, yeah. Let me see if I have a slide that explains this pretty well. Yeah, I'll show this slide. I think it's helpful to see some numbers. So people have probably heard of bonus depreciation, but may not fully understand it. So I'm hoping this will clear it up a little bit. So same example, we've been talking about, bought a property for $1 million, put about 100K of improvements into it. Land value is worth 200,000. And then it was started renting in 2022 as a short-term rental. And so what would happen is we look at the property, we determine, okay, about 16% of the depreciation is going to end up in 5 year, 10% is going to end up in longer, like fencing and stuff like that. And then of that amount, how much can actually be taken in year one is what bonus depreciation is. So if we just do, and this is getting a little in the weeds, this is a little, mathematical in the weeds, but basically bonus depreciation is of the stuff that is shorter than 27 or 39-year property, how much can I take now? And if it's 100% bonus depreciation, then you can take 100% of that number as a year one tax deduction. So right now with this big, beautiful bill, not my wording, but Mr. Trump's, President Trump's, I should say, the Senate is in the midst of passing what looks like will be 100% bonus depreciation. And so that means you're able to take 100% of that accelerated depreciation in year one. And so that gives you a ton of ability to get a huge tax deduction now versus, again, waiting over either 5 years or longer if you're doing straight line depreciation.
So if you could figure out a way to do this every couple of years and just 1031 and 1031 and 1031, that is really a recipe for being able to offset a lot of other ordinary income
Yes, I
and you
mean,
reduce your taxable income.
absolutely. So if we
Yeah.
take kind of the average investor
Mhm.
who maybe has a W-2 kind of job and they're like, okay, I need to diversify, I need to buy some investments on the side. And maybe they want to move into buying more real estate over time. And let's say they buy a property this year, they take their straight line depreciation. They're still going to have quite a bit of tax to pay on their W 2 as well as on the passive side. So they're losing money each year. And that's kind of like knocking them back each year. Versus, let's say, person number two, Molly, buys the same property in this weird fictitious land, but does a cost segregation study, has no taxable income on the property for that year, and actually hits a little bit of their personal income as well. Well, shoot, if she got a 60K check back like John, is she going to invest in the next property a year, 2 years faster? Probably. And so that's the real reason why folks do these studies is they can grow their portfolio a lot faster, and ultimately when it comes to actually selling the property and paying back that recapture of the depreciation, well, they've leveraged their money quite nicely, and they can reinvest that and take a lot more returns now versus waiting 4 years until you can maybe buy your next property.
Okay, tell us about what kinds of properties you've done cost segregations on. Is it just limited to, single family homes and multis, or what's the broad swath of this?
Yeah, it's a great question. A lot of people say, well, shoot, I live in a house. Can I do that? Like, what the heck? I should be able to do that. Unfortunately, not. So, primary residences do not qualify to do a cost segregation study on. Also, they aren't kicking off any depreciation. When you pay your taxes, you do get to take your mortgage interest deduction, but there's no depreciation coming off of your primary house. So, what does that leave? Well, it leaves pretty much everything else that's going to be rented out. So, we do cost segregation studies not only for single family and for duplexes and triplexes and quadplexes and fiveplexes, but anything you can basically think of driving down Main Street. So we do restaurants, we do self storage, we do retail, we're doing salons, we're doing dentist offices, um, anything commercial, anything residential that's not a primary residence is potentially a great candidate for a cost segregation study.
Okay. And what can one expect for the cost of a study?
Yeah, great question. And maybe I'll just answer one question that comes up before that, which
Okay.
is, well, shoot, what's potentially not a good candidate for a cost segregation study? And so, the easy one is primary residence. Another is going to be properties that have really high land value and not a lot of property on it. So if you say, hey, Dylan, we just bought this property out in Montana, and I say, what is it? And you go, well, it's a bunch of land that I'm excited to fish on, and I might rent it out to some fishing people. Okay, well, are there any structures? No, it's actually 100% land. Well, land is not depreciable, so that's not going to work out. So, very high land values is not typically going to be something that you want to cost segregate. And then the other piece is instead of that example of I bought this property, 3 to 4 years ago, I bought this property in 2004 and then we rented it out in starting in 2015. Well, you've already taken quite a bit of depreciation. So there's not, so to speak, so much meat on the bone where it would make sense to do a cost segregation study. And then, yeah, let's talk brass tack. Let's talk cost. If you ask the same question in 2020, or sorry, like 2015, we wouldn't even be having this conversation because the cost of these studies were so prohibitive. They were tens of thousands of dollars and typically a pretty lengthy process. With the advent of a lot of technology, with the ability to do virtual tours now, the cost of those studies has gone down to where if you were looking at a single family home, the cost would be somewhere between like probably $1,400, $1,500 on the low side to maybe like mid 2000s or 3000 if it was a very, very large property. And that can depend on purchase price, cost of improvements, square footage, how many unique units are there if it's multifamily. And then in commercial, it gets a lot more complex. And that will be, the upper fives, tens, $10,000 kind of studies.
Okay, so I have one more question. It seems like, and I still haven't been able to figure this out, but
Yeah.
it feels like the properties that you buy and then quickly remodel. So if you buy a house or an income property and go right in and remodel the kitchens or the bathrooms, is it true that you get to take depreciation on the old kitchen as well as the new kitchen? Or
Yeah.
why is that so beneficial?
Yeah, that's a really, really good comment because you would think, hey, the old kitchen's not there. I don't understand how I'm able to take depreciation on that. If you're going to come and do a tour, you're not going to be able to like go back in time and see the old kitchen, take pictures of that, and do the new kitchen. The answer is a little convoluted. So
Mhm.
the government allows you and basically outlines a way to reconcile both. So you're not going to get as much depreciation on the old kitchen, for example, but you will be able to take some, and then your new kitchen, you'll be able to take all of the depreciation on. So the reason for this is a little muddy, but ultimately, folks on this call are in real estate in some capacity. You might be investing, you might be property managing, you might be doing something. Maybe you're curious, whatever it is. And so the government wants the economy to be stimulated. So it's providing these carrots and sticks. And one of the carrots is depreciation and saying, please go into a house and remodel it. We don't want abandoned buildings everywhere. We don't want old kitchens everywhere. Come in, provide new housing, provide new improvements, and stimulate, contractors, builders, property managers, all these people that are involved in this economy.
Right. Okay, I don't know if we have any actual questions. You must have done a really good job and kind of answered all of our questions. If, we'll give it a second, but anything else? We have your information, right, in case people need to reach out to you.
Yeah, I
Um,
will. I will just share my screen and just kind of show our website briefly,
okay,
just because it's easier to kind of see what that looks like. So if you go to senecacostseg.com, this is our site. We have case studies where you can look through not only single family, but maybe some storage or mobile home park. We have an ability to get an estimate for free. So if you write in and say, hey, I have this property and I want to take a look, we have that ability too. We always ask, who sent you? So if this was the reason and RPA did a nice job of bringing you here, we want to know that, and we'll obviously take even extra care of you.
great. Okay, thank you for everybody's time, and thank you for joining us on this webinar. And that's given us some great insight. We appreciate it. Thank you, Dylan.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Jay. It was truly
All
a
right,
pleasure.
take care.